Hi, Victor. Welcome to the living room. How are you today?
Good, I'm feeling good. Thank you. It's a privilege to be here. Yeah, thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, and it's really a privilege getting to know someone like yourself. I've read your articles, and I thought it'd be really interesting to have you on board to speak about how to be a change maker in the marketplace. Before we jump into this section, do you want to give a brief introduction about yourself?
Sure, I can do that. Um, I'm a father of three kids. Right now, the eldest is 8, 5, and 2. Wife is a teacher, right? And in terms of my career, I used to work full time in the church for quite a while before I stepped away and became an entrepreneur. Took the step of faith. Started coaching and training business, primarily focusing in the area of strengths, helping people and organizations understand how the strengths-based approach can bring about greater performance and bring about greater engagement within teams. And for individuals, helping them to know how to use the strengths every single day to be more productive and to feel like, they have giftings that they can really contribute. And that's what I do. I love doing that. So I'm a certified strengths coach. Currently, I'm going through a new area of coaching as well. We call it ontological coaching. So I'm in the midst of doing that and learning that, and how to bring that more into my area of strengths-based coaching. Yeah, so that's where I am right now.
It's really good. And I think it's quite a change from you coming up from where you used to work in a church environment and going into coaching. But I think all your experiences and what you have learned would have contributed in what you're doing right now. A lot of people might not have heard, or they would have heard of the term marketplace ministry, but not very familiar with what it is. What do you understand by marketplace ministry?
Wow. I guess in a way, marketplace ministry is a big word. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I say this personal assessment where I come from a place where I work in a church setting where a lot of the language are religious in nature. It takes the form of the Bible. Where many people maybe out of the religion of Christianity, sometimes when they hear certain terms, they are unknown. When I think of marketplace ministry, my view of it is keeping first the language in a way where it's accessible to everybody, right? And I see marketplace ministry as very wide. Anyone, basically, even in the church, you can see as a marketplace just because the work is not constrained to just believers or Christians, right? And sometimes the church does work in a setting that reach out to, it could be, let's say, serving foreign workers, serving the needy, serving the disadvantaged. And in my personal view, marketplace ministry is a work that we do, that we are very conscious. We are Christians showing ourselves up to the world and understanding that there's a way that Christians conduct themselves. Whether in a business setting, as a teacher, as an engineer, it doesn't matter, but we do that in a way that we kind of like help people to understand there are certain values that we take. There are certain conduct that we hold ourselves, rather God holds us accountable to, and we want to give our best in everything that we do. So I see that broadly, not so much like, oh, is it a church and is it a non-church setting? But I see it overall more in terms of a language and how we assess, we give accessibility to people around us through the things that we do and the words that we use.
And I like the fact that you call it conduct. It's really true. It's really how we portray ourselves. And marketplace is really regardless of where you are at. But I feel that a lot of times when I speak to people and ask them about like being in the marketplace, it's specifically catered to entrepreneurs or business owners, but it's never.
Mm.
But the majority of people are at your employee level, and they are also in a marketplace, and they actually sometimes do not get the the support or the right equipping to properly conduct themselves in a marketplace in terms of how they actually engage with their clients or with their colleagues and their peers. And I thought that's why it's interesting, because even for me, I've actually worked on both sides. I've worked in a corporate sector, I've worked in a church sector, and I can actually see that there's a balance, and I can also see how it varies. Really, it's like it's so different, and I can actually empathize and understand when a believer is in a marketplace, right? How they might sometimes be put on a spot, and they have these values, but they feel like should they compromise their values to be more accepted in their workplace, or should they take a stand? I think that's where a lot of people stand during this time. Have you seen that? Do you feel that way too?
Yes, definitely. I think there is a lot of pressure, and it comes out because many ideas out there in the world have, in my terms, if I call it some kind of separation, or sometimes we call it compartmentalizing, right? And we see like we show up a certain way in church, and we show up a certain way in our workplace, and at home it might be another way, and sometimes it can get challenging in that sense when it comes to our conduct in the way we show up. And I find that's one big challenge in the world, right? Because of this whole idea of compartmentalizing and separation, and sometimes we get caught. For example, I think sometimes you can't help it. Something happens at home emotionally, you don't feel good, and then you step into work, right? And you have a meeting. You have a meeting with your colleagues, with your boss, but you carry on the particular mood, and it's a mood that doesn't make you feel good because of what happened at home, but you carry that into the workplace. It can be challenging to sometimes say, oh, we want to represent Christ. Yeah, but yet we just came out of a difficult environment. And I think sometimes it's so easy to judge. And I find that in that sense, sometimes when we look at marketplace ministry, it's not as simple, as straightforward as what it is, right? Yeah, that's might be very much what you just said. The conduct is it's very challenging to think about the pressure that people face.
And it's really a pressure, because a lot of times, especially some believers who are new, they face the pressure of trying to be a good testimony. And what you are giving an example is so perfect, right? Like, the world sees Christians, they believe that Christians are supposed to be in a certain way. They are supposed to be more patient, more loving, more kind. And then when they see us, like, but we are humans too. So when we come into a workplace and we flare up or we get upset, sometimes I think the pressure is more on the employee itself, because they feel like they've let down. They feel like, personally, maybe I've let down what I stand for. How can I even go back and share the good news, or even talk to people about my relationship with the Lord? Because I feel like I've let myself down in this certain area. And you see a lot of this. I hear stories all the time where people share about how they they drink, and people ask them, how can you drink when you're a believer? Or they have a tattoo, and people ask them, how can you have a tattoo? And it's very hard. It's very hard. So any advice or any practical tips that you would like to share based on your experience?
First, I would say that many of us can be very harsh on ourselves. I think one very practical tip is to come with a greater sense of being kind to ourselves, and understand that we fail. It's like how God knows that we fall all the time, that we fall short of His standards, right? And not that we take that for granted and we don't feel bad about it, but sometimes I think it is a willingness to say, I'm sorry, and a willingness to move on without just holding that baggage too strong. And I think it is true for every kind of relationship, whether with our spouse, with our colleagues, with our friends, and with our children. I think that's one important thing. This ability to let go. I find after so many years, I find this is sometimes one of the hardest things, because like what you say, unfortunately, I think the reality is once we profess ourselves to be Christians, we get judged a certain way. The words we speak, the way we conduct ourselves. And sometimes we ask ourselves, oh, am I being a good testimony?
Yes.
Like, and that's a very real question.
Yes.
I like to always see that it's a God doesn't see me or see everyone in a compartmentalized world. God sees us the same. We are His children, and He wants us to represent Him well. We want to be the salt and light, and I think it's the willingness to come to the to show up in a way where they will allow Him to shape us and mold us. So I think self-awareness is a huge part, right? And I tend to not go into meetings or any kind of environment and so-called let the environment dictate me. But I think it's to come to a place when I ask myself, okay, what's my mood right now, right? And if I'm anxious or I'm upset, maybe I just came out of a meeting that was just really horrible, right? And I'm about to jump into the next one. How do I deal with that, right? And I understanding that all this carry on to meetings or a bad day at work, and I carry that home. And I think that is a very real skill, right? That we can take, to be conscious of how these things affect us, right? And I wouldn't say it's the same for everybody. Some people take a minute of prayer just to calm down, right? Some people think of something positive and just try to, calm themselves down. We try to go into another context and situation and say like, okay, it wasn't that good earlier, but let me try again, right? And ask God for help. I think it's a consciousness of bringing God into our lives. And I would honestly say that it is one of the most difficult things to do, right? Having this God consciousness and jumping in from meetings to meetings, especially in a busy world like Singapore.
But I do like the fact that you shared two things, right? One is, of course, the self-awareness part. Like, I think it's really being aware and conscious of who you are. I mean, we do face challenges. We sometimes get an unhappy client screaming down our throat, and it's very real. And sometimes being in a position of having that self-awareness, like trying to quickly find that pain and see what's the solution, like what you say is a prayer or going for a walk, or just taking a minute to step back, reevaluate, and then go back into the situation with a fresh perspective, allows a person to detach themselves from carrying that negative emotion or that the bitterness, the frustration all the way throughout the whole day, because that can actually affect them if they don't catch it at the right time. And second thing, I also like the fact that you said don't let your situation dictate you, which is also very true, because sometimes I think it's more of asking ourselves, how is that going to affect me? Like, the situation that we are in, how people see us, how is that going to affect us? How is that going to add value to our life? If it doesn't affect us, because a lot of times people forget things. Like, people could have said something in that spur of the moment and they will forget, but we keep that in our mind, at the back of our mind, and we keep thinking about how do I approach this person again because they said something like that. So it's really not allowing that situation to dictate how you feel, and just letting go is the toughest thing to do, but I think that's the best way to move on very quickly.
This I find if I could share one practical tip, and this is something that kind of like someone shared with me. 3 times a day, at the start of the day, right? And you remind yourself it's a new day, right? And what I mean when I say remind yourself, it could be through anything. Some people, it's just drinking a cup of coffee and say, okay, this is a brand new day. Some people is having a nice breakfast. Some people is prayer, a devotion. Some people go for a walk. But it is a time that reminds us it's a brand new day, right? And God, let God come in and work. And that's the first part. And maybe at the midday, it could have been a good morning, could be a terrible morning, but at the midway point, and you kind of like shake it all off, like, okay, whatever happened, let me make the rest of the day productive, right? And again, it's coming back to that mood and say like, okay, how do I make use of the rest of the today, right? And at night, I think it's about giving thanks, right? And it could be really a difficult day, and I'm sure many people understand, especially parents.
Yes.
But I think sometimes it's to calm ourselves down. It's like, wow, it's a brand new day. I give thanks and I look forward to tomorrow again. I found this practice and someone shared me and said, wow, I never thought it can be simple, but it's most crucial to not let the waves of our life kind of consume us. Say that, but to create space for some kind of God consciousness. I think these are little bits of things. I don't know. I'm just sharing something that I think could be helpful for some people.
And it's a good well, like how you break it down, right? So it actually keeps you on track. Like, it could be like some people meditate on verses, some people just, keep something positive, but it's you carry it throughout the day. So you keep yourself in a very positive, keep yourself happy, keep yourself joyful. I think one of the things I learned over the years, right, is sometimes when I am feeling happy, when I'm feeling joyful all the time, I don't let anything affect me very easily. So it's really trying to find what works for you. I think you have a practical application that you do, and I have my own way of doing it. But really, at the end of the day, as you get to know yourself better, you will know what works for you, what keeps you going. So you can quickly try to find a way, especially during these times when it's so tough. We see people losing jobs, you see people trying to hold on to their jobs. So it's really trying to keep a positive attitude about whatever that you're going through. Our channel is more for women viewers. So I think just asking you, right, like for women leaders, when I say leaders, right, I won't even go all the way up to maybe a C-level person. I feel like every person is a leader, whatever capacity they are in. So for women leaders in the marketplace, right, how do you think that they can, how do they relate to other people in a biblical perspective? For example, like, if the word says that you need to be forgiving, but I don't think every time you can, you might find some colleagues that you are so unacceptable that you don't want to forgive, that you don't want to like have communication. So how can they relate?
One of the things, I guess, it's when I think about this, I do lots of training and coaching for female leaders. There was once I spoke in a conference, and it's a women's conference for leadership. Yeah. And first thing I would say is God created men and women differently. And we both have our roles. It's important to understand that. I think the world I have, my personal assessment, we are coming into a world where you see a lot more so-called women rising up, and a lot more movements, leadership conference, and specifically catering to women. You could see that now women have a greater voice. And for people who feel that way, that's great. I mean, there are many people who feel like maybe the culture that I'm in stifles my growth. And there's a huge struggle, and I wouldn't claim I understand and I can fully empathize with what certain women go through. But one of the things I would say to them is every person's struggle is real and different. It's important not to come and see it as almost as a fight of men versus women. I think once we have some kind of polarity, it's dangerous grounds. I think it's really an understanding of our own identity. Yeah, and asking ourselves like, what are some personal challenges I'm working through? What's God teaching me? Personally, I think, you know, if you check out, there's lots of those kind of personality assessment and stuff. Like, they tend to say men are more logical and objective, and women are a bit more, you know, they show their emotions more, and lots of kind of a data in that area. And sometimes that's a challenging thing because it's not true for every women. Some women say, no, that's not me, right? And we tend to quickly box, sometimes using all these things, we box people up, and it's not true. So I think I come back to, it's important to first look at what our primary concern is, you know, what God is teaching me about leadership. I think women are one of the most powerful leaders. I say that because especially, you know, women immediate, it's like a mother's role. A guy can't play that. A male can never play that. You know, and many women, when they grow into motherhood, they step into the role, that leadership, right? That capacity is immediately, almost like you're thrown in. No amount of preparation will get you there, right? And I always believe that God gave women a powerful authority, and just the role of mothers show that in just one example, but show that in a great way. Personally, when I work with many leaders, female in the workplace, or employees who are female, one of the, sometimes the challenge is cultural, how the culture see us. As when I say us, I mean see the female, and what they bring forward. So sometimes you hear different people say tips like, you should speak up more, or you should not let your emotions overwhelm you. And I find that those are very generic things, and sometimes we observe that. If I'll give a tip, I would simply say that God bring us back to, if women is through some kind of emotion, they have a greater emotional range. Personally, I observe that female have a greater emotional range than men. Then that is their power. That's one of the key power of their leadership, right? They use that to great effect. There are certain things that women can do that men, I wouldn't say can't do, but can't do very well, right? And likewise, it's the same. Some features of men are not so commonly found in women, and so I think that's just how God made us. I do recognize the challenge that women have, right, in the workplace. My personal, if I end this part, when we talk about women, it is not to make things so polarized. It is not women against the world, or women against men, or women against other women, but it's really to come to a place where I say, there is, in the world right now where information is a lot more, knowledge a lot more, people are coming to the understanding of the capacity of women. And it's for every woman to have the ambition to say, hey, God created me for a purpose. How do I enter into that? How do I know my own strengths? How do I know what I'm vulnerable to? What are my limitations? And I think now we are better. We are at a place, there's so much more that women can enter into, unlike the past. That's my personal assessment. There's a great opportunity out there, right? And it's more, I would say, it's an invitation for many women to rise up now, and to see that they can really serve this world. It's no longer maybe the assessment, I would say, people tend to see, or ruled by men, many so-called leadership roles. But women are entering into a world right now that is increasingly accepting of female leaders. And so therefore it's important for women to step into a new identity, of saying that, yeah, I can I can manage the workplace, I can manage at home, and I continue to represent Christ in a way that gives glory to God. So I hope I did answer your question, but that's my personal view.
It's really good because you see what I picked up quite a few things from what you shared. One of it is of course identity, which is really what I'm very passionate about. I think a lot of times I really feel that if a person is very secure in their identity, right, they'll be able to tap into their strengths a lot more easier, and they'll be able to like really find their purpose in life, and they can go about it without getting affected in any way. So that's really what I'm very passionate about sharing. And one more thing I really liked, Victor, what you shared was also on the fact that for women, right, it's about emotions because we are, we have a whole spectrum of emotions. And sometimes what happens, and I've heard this even personally said to me as well, that, sometimes we allow our emotions to cloud our judgment. So sometimes it's very hard because for women leaders, right, we are wired in a certain way. So sometimes we are more nurturing, and we are also very emotional. We are very sensitive as well. But I think sometimes people use that as a clutch kind of thing, and they say that your emotions are the one that stops you from being an effective leader, or you cannot be an effective leader because you are too nurturing already, and that's not leadership. So and I really like that, hearing from you to say that sometimes these are all our strengths, but it's just about finding a balance that will make women a good leader, finding a balance between their emotions, finding the balance in terms of their identity and strengths as well.
And maybe I would say, yeah, that's a lot of this kind of words being thrown out there, like women let the emotions get the better of them, and there are lots of this kind of criticisms around. I think it is also, I think it's two parts. One is actually when the world says that, it's also acknowledging that women have a greater emotional range. So women coming into leadership, if they want to grow into leadership, they must take that, when I say that ability to go wider in the emotional range and understand the impact that can make. I think it's true to some extent that women need to grow in that place where they learn how to handle the emotions, and use often the emotional range, the wider range that God has given to them, and use it really to serve people. In the same way, if I would flip it around, men tend to show less of the emotion, tend to be very cerebral, and that's one of men's challenge as well. And men are not spared in that sense, right? A lot of criticism. Men are not so emotional, a bit heartless, and too logical, and men have to grapple with that and understand that if they don't deal with that, they cannot empathize with people. They're not going to be good leaders, right? That limits their leadership. So I would say the more we realize these things, and the more we need to tell ourselves, my growth towards leadership, I have a responsibility to not let this criticism derail me, but to let these criticisms be a place where I assess myself. Where am I at? How do I grow? Right? And what does God want to teach me? And I find that our strengths can be weaknesses, and it's about taking the raw talents and abilities and really molding and shaping and growing that to the place where we serve people, and people see the fruit. People see the fruit, and they know, like, hey, this person has the capacity, and they respect us, and they buy that kind of a leadership. And I always believe you don't need positions. You don't need kind of like a role to do that. Yeah. So every mother knows that, right? No one appointed this person to be a mother. You give birth, and then you are the leader. You're the leader immediately over your kid, and the kid sees you in a particular way. And yeah, and I often think that it's one of the great um, leadership capacity that women has. Yeah, and I like to tell people, a woman can run a household well, can run any organizations.
I like that. I really like what you shared about, like the fact that for women, right? It's so interesting that you shared that it's not the place, it's not the position. You don't need to be you don't have to have a position to be a leader. And I think that's really where some people need to have a change in their thinking, because sometimes people feel like I am not in a position to have influence. I don't have a position. I'm not in a leadership position, but it's really about not having a title attached to it, but it's really about being who you are, being real, and trying to actually serve in whatever capacity that you can have. You can start with your own community, and saying that, right, coming to that point of your, finding the strengths, and coming to the fact that how women can have, they can be a leader wherever they are without a title. How do you think that they can actually increase their influence and authority? I think sometimes it's like, I think some women are very soft spoken themselves, so it's very hard to be assertive. It's very hard. They're not a lot of us who are very, like, wow, rah rah kind, who can shout and who can, drive a point home strongly. There are some people who are very soft spoken, and I believe that that is not a weakness, because even if a woman is soft spoken, she can be a very good leader. It's just trying to find a way to use that influence and authority in her own way, being comfortable to herself.
I would say it's a very good point. I would say two things. One of the thing, if I use this term called power, right? When you talk about influence, I talk about, do I have the power to move things or put things into effect? And and I find that power always is some kind of correlated to your level of concern, right? For example, if I come back, I'm a mother and I see my kids in danger, I don't need to say, do you give me power to save my kid? Right? I don't need that. It's because of my concern. I don't need any roles or anything. I know I need to do something. So power is very much tied to the level of concern, and I think that's critical to know that it's nothing to do with the role, but it's how we view what it's how we view the responsibilities that God has given to us as an individual in the organization. Right. So that's one. Second thing I think is to pay attention to how the world sees versus how God wants us to see things. Right. And that there are just so many examples. You'll never see a one size fit all. There are many kind of teachers. There are many kind of mothers. There are multiple parenting approaches, and one method that works for a particular context might not work so well in another context. I think, why do I say that? I think it's important that for people who struggle with, oh, I'm not very, for example, I'm not very um, extroverted, right? I'm usually very shy and introverted. Now that itself can, once they see as limiting, they limit their ability to make change, right? If I come back to the example, it's I imagine a mother needing to say something to defend their kid. They wouldn't think about, oh, I'm shy, I can't defend my kid, right? I would say like, hey, but this is my kid. I love them. I want to do something, and they come out of whatever personality they have. And so it's important that we do not let the world dictate like whether we need to be of a particular personality. But it's important to come back to, who am I, and how does God want me to live out my role, to be responsible, to contribute to my team, my organization, to the well-being of my colleagues. And I have seen the most quiet person, change, make huge changes, right? And I've seen that in school context as a trainer. I've seen that in school context. I've seen that in a meeting where the loudest person, just by saying something, didn't move anyone, while the most quiet person say, "Shall we try this?" Just a whisper, right? And say, "Yeah, I think so. That's a great idea." And I think sometimes it's how we see ourselves, right? And recognizing, like what you say earlier, that we need to be secure in who we are. It is not about the personality that makes the leader. In fact, I think one of the things that we talk about leadership is how we view responsibility. I think identity is very much tied to our rights and responsibilities, and that's critical. So we go into our workplace and not just, this is just work. I will just do what I need to do and go home. But I seek God purposefully and say, how do I be salt and light? And how do I love? How do I submit to a leader if my leader is difficult? And what's my role and what's my responsibility? That's no easy answer. I think that's why when we say we pray for God to lead us, we are asking a person to lead us, not methods, not even principles, but a real person to lead us. And I think that I want to come back to that relationship, with God as critical.
It's really good that you're sharing that, right? In terms of like power and that example, I think it will a lot of people, women can identify with that, which is really true because, you don't wait for someone to give that authority to you to take action, because it's if you are even not for, maybe not for people who are mothers, but maybe even if you're a sister, even if you are whatever role that you don't wait until that power is given to you. But none of us actually look at it that way in a corporate sector. We wait until that assignment is given. We wait until that task is assigned to us. But we don't have to wait. We can actually stand up and say that, you know what, I have this talent, I can help in that capacity. Can I actually take that from your hands, or maybe can I contribute? So we are actually stretching ourselves, and that is really being the salt and light, because we are not being just like the world. We are not waiting for some things. We're taking a proactive approach to come out and and contribute effectively. And also like the fact that you share that about submitting to people. Sometimes I think the tendency is like we come across people who are our bosses or our leaders, but they're not very smart. We might know things faster than them, but that's actually I believe there is a favor in submission, because sometimes it's easier to submit to someone who is stronger, who is smarter. But I think the challenge is submitting to someone who is not as smart as us, and coming under the person, taking that stand. That's really that's also being the salt and light, taking that, swallowing our pride and taking that stand to say, you know what, I know I can do this better than you, but because you are put there in that position, I will submit to you.
Interesting that you brought that up. In fact, I had a female leader who taught me this. And I'll emphasize females. Like, I learned lots of things from females. So this person taught me that, hey Vic, David in the Bible. So I think the context was I was asking her, what do you think David can teach us about leadership? And this female person in the workplace taught me and said, I think when I examine David's life, one of the things about leadership is he learns to submit and serve under leaders who were, if I'll term the terrible leaders, right? So many times. And that was a huge leadership lesson. And I was just blown away. It was exactly like what you said about when sometimes leaders in the workplace, and we could have not so in our own assessment, leaders that could have certain challenges, and we struggle with knowing what to do with them. Should we submit? And what should we do? And I think, so when I think about David and what this female friend shared with me. I was like, I never thought that way. That was a great insight. Yeah. Sorry, this just off my head. I know when you talk about this submission to leader, I thought like, wow, I recall this female leader and what she taught me.
And this is really true because a lot of times for people who are not Christians, they always think that it's fictional, but it's really not fictional. A lot of the stories that we see and we relate to in the Bible are actually history. It's things
Yeah.
that happened, and we gleaned a lot of leadership lessons. And one of my favorite go-to book for leadership is always the Book of Nehemiah, because I really like the fact of how Nehemiah actually, the delegation part, his leadership. So there's so many things that you can learn just by reading that story alone. So I actually do understand where you're coming from, because if you, for believers who understand the story of David, they would know how the King Saul was always going after his life, always trying to kill him. But David always submitted, and that actually helped him to move up in position, give him the influence with people as well. I think that takes that's really coming back, right, to how you are being seen in the marketplace, because you are already very
Mhm.
different. If someone is always coming after you and you are not taking any shortcuts to get away from it, but you are standing there bravely day after day, not being, I wouldn't say it's like just taking it in a very negatively. I'm not saying that if people abuse you or if people talk down to you, you accept it. But I think facing that challenge in a positive way, standing up for yourself, being assertive, um, that is really what people will see. There's a change, there's a difference about this person, and there's a difference with other people, and that actually helps to increase that influence in your life as well, and authority in your life. Like what you say, maybe they might not be the loudest person, but a soft whisper, and the way they share, the way they talk, people will buy into the idea, because they buy into the people, they buy into how the people live their lives. It's never about their methods.
Absolutely true. It's never about the methods. Yeah. And God is always in the business of changing us. And we have so much more to grow and change. And I think that's always important. I believe that David, sometimes we look back and say, wow, like this is David, but the lessons he probably have to wrestle through in his heart, in his soul, the pain that he suffered is probably huge, right? And the courage, I always think like, hey, I want to have the kind of courage to face up to these challenges and to learn how to deal with them, right? And I think that's big, right? For any person, man or woman, who aspire to be in leadership kind of roles or influence.
And that brings us to the next question, right, I have for you, right? Like, you shared about David's challenges and how he would have faced, how discouraged he could have get and all that. And I think taking that into the workplace, right? Sometimes as women, we might have all those things, but sometimes there's also a fear because we feel like we are missing out by not compromising our values. Sometimes I come from industries where drinking out is the norm. I mean, I'm not saying that drinking is wrong. I'm just saying that if you actually if you do it in a way that it actually affects how you are, like if you are so drunk and you're going back home in a drunk state and all that, I think that's not a very good message to be sent across. But maybe having it in moderation is still very fine. That's what I feel personally. But I think sometimes some people don't even want to go there. They don't even want to entertain their idea. And along the way, right, I've encountered this in my own work experiences. Like, some people will just drop it off. They won't ask you even. They will say that, hey, I think I'm not going to invite you to the barbecue because I know you're a Christian. You won't enjoy it. That, which is totally fine. But sometimes, right, it feels like, for an employer point of view, sometimes some people could feel like I'm being missed out because I would not have that relationship, uh, or that kind of like you are not going to be able to build on that, because when you come back to work next day, everybody will be talking about what happened at this event and you'll be totally clueless. And after a while, two things can happen. Some people can either compromise and start attending that and just forget about whatever they about being a testimony and all that. Another thing that could happen is people get very discouraged to the point that sometimes they feel very bitter about it. They feel like, why am I tasked to do something so hard? So they don't blame themselves, they blame the religion, or they blame the high standards that we have to keep. Yeah. So what do you think is the best way to approach this?
Wow, that's a tough question. I think that one of the things, the worldview Christians, the way, just maybe my personal view, it's Christians tend to have very strong idea of right and wrong, and not cutting back, and like we don't mince our words. Oh, this is right and this is wrong, and it's not uncommon to hear that, oh, many Christians are very judgmental. And unfortunately, I think that that's the way we process things. A certain framework in our mind, like what is good and what's bad, what's right and what's wrong. Unfortunately, I think when we move in the world of it's called the marketplace, right? Language that are accessible to people. When we enter into different culture, different workplace, and every workplace is different, every culture is different. If I work in another country, everything changes. Like we have to know that actually it's more important to think about actually what do I want. And I think that is the primary thing that people should come down to, like, what really do I want? Is it about me, my success, or is it about how I represent God? Right? And I think sometimes we don't have clarity. We tend to see all these things together, and it's not true. Sometimes after many, many lessons, when we reflect and we feel like actually God is showing us that we are very self-centered. Right? And all these things that I think about is actually down to serving my own needs. And I think that that's another lesson in itself. But I want to come back down to when we understand what we want, we can come with another frame of thinking, right? Rather than just right and wrong, there can be what works, what doesn't work, right? And when we find something that doesn't work towards what truly we want, we can quickly make an adjustment. And I think that when we play in that space, then we know that it's not so much method, because a method that works in company A might not work in company B, right? But it is coming back to, as a Christian, what is it that I want, right? And so similarly, if I work in company A in Singapore and I have success, if I get posted to China, same company, right? China in a different kind of worldview, very much. Maybe all these ways that I so-called conduct myself might not necessarily work in another country, another culture. And therefore, I think it's not so much right and wrong, black and white. Even though I'm not saying that it's bad in itself. That has its when it comes to moral issues, I think that's important. But I think it's very complex. I think we tend to use one framework of thinking and apply it to all. But I would say that when we learn how to adapt in a very fast-paced, changing world, sometimes the clarity is about what do I really want? That's the number one thing. What's the result? And therefore, how do I conduct myself towards getting this result? Right? And if it doesn't work, make a change. Right? If it works, very good, stick by it. But we don't have to treat it as a Bible. Right? And sometimes God will have us adjust ourselves. I think that's why we need the wisdom. I think we need godly wisdom, because no methods stay like a constant throughout. That's my personal view. I think that in that sense, we also have God give us our conscience, what works for someone else might not work for me. So I need to be careful to know that. So someone who could be drinking a lot, uh, no one knows what's an acceptable range, right? 1 cup, 2 cup, and 3 cup, and so for some, it's just I rather not drink and all, and that's fine. I think it's important that we don't look at like should we do A or should we do B? I think the world focuses a lot about the how. Um, the beauty of Christianity that's different from everything else is God gave us an identity to start off in that my way of relating to God can be very different from another person. And at the end of the day, I'm the child, right? It's just like in the real world, if I have a brother, my brother is different from me. So as an identity, as a child of God, the way I relate to God is different from another person. And I think God gave us that conscience to say, how do we deal with that, and how do I conduct myself that I know that, hey, I represent God and I can hopefully move towards something that I want to have. Yeah.
I really like what you shared about the godly wisdom, like, and it's so true because there's the two things that will help to empower women to actually make a stand for themselves. Because one is being very sure of your own walk, your own relationship. Because like what you say, we react in certain ways, and it's very nice that you say it in a very practical way. Because a lot of us have siblings, and we know that like we are different from our siblings, the way we react to things or the way we do it. But at the end of the day, that does not change the position that we are the daughter of that house, or we are the son and daughters of that house. And I think we tend to react in a certain way based on the relationship we have with our father, like how much can we get away, what kind of um, you know like buffers do we have, what kind of buffers do we play with, is based really on our walk, on our relationship with our own father. So I think if you put it that way, right, it makes it so much practical. And second is, of course, godly wisdom. Like wisdom will give you this discernment that allows you to know how far can you go, how far or where you should stop. I think that's a very true thing, that we can identify it, like when we go out somewhere and we feel like there's a conscience in us, we feel like, you know what, this is the max I can go, I should stop right now, I should stop this, or maybe I should not even do this. I think that's wisdom, that's discernment that's in us, because sometimes we feel like we can handle it, but that's God's way of telling us, like, no, you can't handle this, you're not prepared to handle this. So it's the way of really tuning into yourself, I feel, really based on your identity and all that, tuning into yourself to know that and when you are at that level, you feel comfortable to walk away without even getting affected from something. Whatever that's thrown at your workplace, you don't get affected.
If I could add on to that, I like to make different distinctions, and I think I had the privilege of working in church and working in the marketplace, and one distinction that I see is in the church we talk a lot about identity, right? The being and the doing and how they are tied together. And that language is very much accessible to many Christians in church teachings or something, and church teachings, or when we read the Bible, that's real. But when we move into the marketplace, all the things that people talk about, you can go online. Oh, the 5 tips to become a leader, or the 5 parenting methods that work. It's hugely emphasizing on the doing. So you can say, oh, if you do all these things, you'll be a great leader, with nothing related to the identity. Like what kind of leader are you? What kind of character do you have? And very, very seldom you hear things like that. There is a certain dichotomy, which is why I say like it's kind of separated, right? The church see that as integrated, the world sees that as separated. Which is why I think it's not uncommon that people tend to look for methods, look for ways, like what can I do to become better? And my advice would, it's a very slow process, but it is deeply sustainable. which is always to come back to this whole idea of what we term it as identity. Identity can be in simple things broken down into like, how do I show up, right? And when I look at my physical body, it's like when people look at me, you can't say it's not true, because we all judge just first impression, how a person stand, how a person sit, how a person smile or not smile, and how do I show up to the world. That's one identity, right? And then we have the emotions. What would people say about me having know me enough? Oh, this person is constantly resentful. This person is constantly angry. Oh, this person is always full of gratitude. Oh, very joyful. How do we show up? That's another way that we look at identity. Right? And the lastly, and I'll say that it is the stories we tell ourselves. Right? When I show up, right? And when someone says something, what is the story that goes on behind my head? And I think these are big things. And I'm not going to talk about this in this session, but I think that the way of moving towards identity has a much more sustainable way of seeing ourselves as leaders. Because when we know who we are, we tend to find methods and ways that to kind of bring out the best of us, rather than simply just following methods. I don't know whether that makes sense, but that's something that I would love to share to the audience.
Relate in a way, it's more applicable to wherever we are based. And I think I like the fact that you always talk about like coming back to a family, because I think you're a father, so maybe that's why that illustration speaks so deeply to you. But coming back from that kind of perspective, right, if you have that kind of values at home, a lot of us, when we go to work, right, we bring our values that our parents teach us. Some things we do, things like showing kindness to people, like when guests arrive at the house, what do? You serve them a drink. These are values that are taught by parents that we carry everywhere we go. Even as we grow up, some things don't change. But I think really coming back to the identity, right, when you know what are the values the Lord has given you, you know yourself, like this is what I want to be like, and this is what is my values, the values that God has given us. I think as we come up, if we don't see it as a religious kind of thing, but we see it as a relationship, it becomes so easy to show up daily and just be ourselves, because we know where we are at, we know where our identity is, what our values. So we just show up daily and just be ourselves. I think that will be how I take it from what you have shared.
Yes, and one of the things I will add on is this whole idea of being ourselves. We also have to embrace the fact that we are growing, and we will grow. So this whole idea of ourselves is constantly evolving. And I think that's a powerful thing that people need to recognize. Like today, maybe I realize I'm a bit more self-centered. In that realization, I can change. And half a year later, people see that could be some fruit, when I make towards a change, and I become kinder as a person, I'm more helpful to my colleague. And therefore, that's something that Christians got to recognize, that maybe it's a little bit different from what the world teaches. Because I hear a lot of message out there that's be yourself. And I think from the Christian point of view, that is God is constantly working in us. And I think that's a very, very powerful thing. Whether we want it or not, we have to recognize that God is constantly working in us and that we are evolving. And sometimes He shows us the ugliness. This is who we are right now, but we can change. Yeah. So I think that is a very key part of also embracing our identity, that we are constantly being shaped by God. Yeah, I don't know whether how you resonate with that, but that's I constantly have to remind myself too.
And that's really true because we are changing every time, that's, I think that 10 years down the road, 10 years before, my past 10 years will be so different from what I am right now in the present and what I'm going to in the future. I think that's the beauty of being a believer because, you keep constantly changing, you change and you change for the better, it's not for the worse. In terms of, a quote, is there a quote that inspires you that you live by?
Quote that inspired. There are many, but if I off my head, I would say um, I see a Jesus walking to the cross, and there is not just tears, there is sweat, and there is suffering and there's pain before he was crucified. I think sometimes if we want to make an impact and make a difference, and we talk about leadership, it's not so easy. It is if Christ is our model, that has to be an acknowledgement that in the whole process of change, there's a lot of pain. There can be suffering. I see courage. So I wouldn't say it's a quote, but if I would simplify in my head, it's just to get to the place that you want, right, requires blood, right, sweat, a lot of tears and pain, and I think that picture and rather that quote reminds me of the work that I'm constantly going through. Yeah, but it's a joy when I embrace that.
That's really nice. That's really beautiful way of putting it because the Christian walk is not an easy walk. We have a lot of our trials and persecutions, but that gives us so much strength. It gives us so much wisdom, and we grow. We really grow, when we overcome certain challenges. And I think that's how we sow seeds as well, how we can able to share and impact the community around us because once we've come out from something, a challenge, or or something that a trying time, we're able to share that, the kind of fruits or the spoils of what we've gone through. And then when we share it to people, we empower them that it's not going to be something that they're going to suffer for long. There is going to be a higher way or something even better that's at the horizon. So Victor, coming to the end of the section, right, I really, really enjoyed like all this sharing and all this practical tips and whatever that you've shared. Really, I think it actually shows a different side of leadership. And I wouldn't hear something like that if I had a woman leader speak on women leadership. So coming from your perspective, as a father, I think it all actually sums up.
Thank you. It's been great just to be able to share like what's on my heart.
And coming to the end of this show, is there any practical tips or any key takeaways that you would like to leave behind for the viewers out there?
Oh, if I would say that the small things in life counts. We might not see it that way, but every little bit counts. Sometimes the little change that we make, to us it seems nothing, but every bit of it molds us and shape us. So to all those of you who are listening, whenever you try to make a change and you don't see anything that comes out of it, don't give up. God sees, and God says, keep going. Don't beat yourself up. Be kind to yourself. But at the end of the day, you will be a glorious time. That's the promise that God gave to us. I think that's what I will share. Just to look forward and not always just look back.
Thank you so much, Victor. And with that, we've come to the end of the section, and I really appreciate you taking time to do this on, on a public holiday as well. So really thanks for just taking this time, because I think this tips and whatever that you've shared, right, to me is even if it just empowers one person, I think that's more than enough. we're not talking about like what you say, small steps, right? Not taking about like the masses or how big it's going to be get, but it's really starting small. As long as it impacts someone, even one person, I think that's more than I feel like I've done more than my part. So I'm just going to end this segment. So for viewers who are watching this, please like, subscribe, and share this videos to other women who you would like to empower. And if you do have any inspiring stories, do write in to me as well so that we can reach out to you. So thanks so much for your time, Victor.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.
Bye.